All right, we're in the middle of a series called The Lies That We Believe In, and today we're going to be picking on men. So, girls, don't check out. Don't check out. We're going to get you next week. but today we're going to be talking about some of the lies that men tell themselves. I came across a video this week, and you do a lot of YouTube. There's so much good stuff on YouTube, and there's not so much good stuff on YouTube, but there's some really good teaching videos on there, and sometimes you just catch yourself, and all of a sudden 2 hours are gone. And but I try to look at educational thing. I came across this interview by Kerry Niehoff. Was a Canadian pastor for many years, and then now he does content online. He does a great job, and he interviews people. And he's just a great. I just enjoy him very much. And he had a gentleman on this week. His name was Scott Galloway. Scott is a professor at one of the New York universities. He teaches in the business area, but he's been doing a lot of research on young men. And the title, what caught my attention to this video, it was entitled "Why Young Men Are Filled with Rage." So that caught my attention. That's a good clickbait there. And so he's a really sharp guy. He's an atheist, and he's not anti-religion. Actually, he said he grew up and religious people were really kind to him and good to him. He just doesn't buy into most of it, but he really feels like it's important for a culture to have that. And so just coming from that background, and he also, not during the interview, but I went to check out some different videos that he does, and he uses pretty colorful language in some of his other things that he does. So just to let you, if you're going to look this person up, just to warn you a little bit, his content is excellent. And they were talking about these young men, and he calls it a crisis within our culture right now. And these are quotes from him. He said, "On any metric, young men are doing worse than anyone else. Women still experience a lot of struggles, but their progress is fantastic, and we should do nothing to get in the way of their progress. For example, more single women own homes now than single men, and many more are graduating from college." But then he says, "There is no group in our society that has fallen further and faster than young men. We have homeless and we have a homeless problem, an opiate problem, and a suicide problem, but actually we have a male homeless problem, a male opiate problem, and a male suicide problem. Males are 3 times more likely to be addicted, 4 times more likely to kill themselves, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated, and 2.5 times more likely to be homeless. And because of the advantage," these are his words, "because of the advantage that men have had for so long, there is really a lack of empathy for them. They are confused in the dating market. 2 out of 1, or the ratio for college is 2 to 1, 2 women for every 1 person that's in college. Men drop out at a higher rate." And then he says this, he says, "It's a real problem. And he's talking about dating, because women mate horizontally and economically up, while men horizontally and economically down. And so when the pool of viable mates in the eyes of women gets smaller and smaller, you have less household formations, and now you have women dating much older because they want they want someone that's economically and emotionally viable to support and to be a mate." And so then he goes, "So what do you have? You have young men that doesn't have the same economic prospects that his dad has had." And he goes on to say, he has a series of algorithms and companies trying to segregate him from society to convince him he doesn't need a relationship, he just needs porn. He doesn't need to work, he just needs Coinbase and Robinhood. He doesn't need friends, he just needs Reddit and Discord. And he says, "I get most comments from mothers." I had a mother tell me, he says, "My daughter goes to Penn and my other daughter goes to Chicago University, but my son's in the basement vaping and playing video games." He says, "We are creating a generation of millions of young men who are lonely, not economically and emotionally viable. They feel rejected by society, by the economy, by potential mating opportunities." And then he says this, "There is nothing more dangerous than a lonely, broke young man. The most violent, unstable societies in the world all have one thing in common: too many young men with no prospect." Isn't that scary? That caught my attention. And so I listened to the whole hour interview of him. And he just talks about how economically, even though we have inflation, economically, the United States is still in really good shape compared to worldwide. But yet there's just this downfall with young men. Part of me thinks it's on purpose. When you make changes within a culture and you try to uh, do some try to make major changes, you do some of these things to kind of squash other people down. I came across I was reading the Bible, believe it or not. I was reading the Bible this week. And I was doing some research for this sermon actually on men. And I have a very good resource that is basically an index of all the topics in the Bible, and it's just a great index. It's not Nave's Talkable. This is another one, and I just ran through men, and one of them said, it in the categories of men, it says in the dangers of men out of culture. That's what it said. So I looked it up, and when men are squashed down in culture, it's a curse. The Bible says. So when God came to punish the people of Israel, he took their men out as a punishment for their culture. And when conquering nations would come, they would take the men out in order to carry out punishment on that nation because of the roles that they played in society. I just thought that was fascinating. And so there's a crisis in young men's leadership, and really put a passion on my heart to what we can do as a church in order to encourage our young men. And we've been talking about really focusing on church and reaching young people, because it's really, really hard out there today to live out there and to get all these confusing things that are coming your way. And how do you sort through all that? And it's our responsibility to help them, to do the best that we can. And so we have this going on in our culture, and it's really good that atheists are seeing this. This isn't just Christian people, and Christy and I were talking about, Christy Urban and I were talking about that previously. Sometimes when Christian people say this, they just say, oh, they're just Christians, they're just mad at the world. These are people that see these things happening, and they see them in the context of culture and in universities, and they're concerned by that. I just thought that was fascinating. By the way, if you want to look at the downfall when you take men out of culture, look up Isaiah 3, verses 1 through 3, Ezekiel 17, 11 through 14, or Lamentations 5, verse 14. It's really amazing where it talks about that it's a curse on a culture when you degrade men. Now, we're going to be talking about, that's young men, but we're talking about all men today, and about the lies that we tell ourselves. Some of these are the lies that we tell ourselves. These young men look to maybe online and social media to find their purpose and meaning and value in life, and that's empty in that life. And so some of these lies, these are some of the top 5 lies that men tell themselves. Again, some of this stuff comes from Chris Thurman, the Outline does. He wrote a book called The Lies We Believe. Again, highly recommend, but I want to give him credit in the content that the Outline and some of the content that I give comes from him. So it's not just my research. It's just that a lot of it's coming from his book. He says this: over the years, we've seen many portrayals of men as only thinking about work, sex, beer, and sports. In the sitcom Married with Children, the patriarch of the family is Al Bundy, a sex-obsessed, beer-guzzling shoe salesman who is constantly thinking about how unhappily married he is, his long-lost glory playing high school football, and never having enough money. While it's a comedy, he writes, it's a painful show to watch if you're a reasonably healthy man because of how Al is portrayed. A buffoonish loser who doesn't love his wife and children in a healthy and mature manner, can never seem to do anything right, and can only see women as sex objects. That's the image of men kind of thrown out there by the culture around us. So what are some of these lies that we tell ourselves? And ladies, please check. It's for everybody to listen, so don't check out. And like I said, we get you next week. We get to point out those things next week. Number one of the lies is, I don't have what it takes to be a man. Now, I grew up watching John Wayne movies, and I love John Wayne movies. He was a cool dude, a big dude. He never lost. He never shot anybody in the back. I don't know if you ever noticed that or not, but he refused to do that in any of his movies. When Clint Eastwood came and when he started to rise up in the 60s, he didn't like it because Clint would shoot anybody, and no matter where they were. He says, I'm not going to shoot anybody in the back. He was always kind to the indigenous people, even though if they went to war, but he always had, with the Native Americans, he treated them fairly in most of his movies. He's just a different character. But we grew up and he just liked his toughness. He was big. He didn't take any crud from anybody. And one of my favorite movies is Big Jake. And when somebody takes his grandson, and so he has to go find the persons because they were holding him as a ransom. But he had a dog named Dog, and the dog would listen to him. He'd go, dog, and the dog would attack. And he'd go, dog, and the dog would come back. I said, that's awesome. I want a dog like that. Right? So we grew up with these images. And big, rough, tough, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just watched actually an excellent documentary about him on Netflix, about his rise to fame. And what a driven man. But we looked at him, big guy, Rocky, and Sylvester Stallone, all these people that I grew up with. I know I'm really dating myself to the 70s and 80s and so on and so forth. But even James Bond through the years. I've watched all the James Bond movies. This debonair, cool-looking guy, always handsome, always could put on a good fight, always dressed wonderfully, always had the women, always had the cars, all these images that we have. And when guys look up to those kind of things, they're going like, man, I will never, ever be able to measure up because look at all these cool guys within culture. And so we get a lot of messages about what a real man is, messages that prompt us to compare ourselves with other men in a way that leaves us feeling, most of us feeling, that we failed in life. In this world, you're a man if you're big and strong, sleep with as many women as possible before you marry, beat people to the top of the corporate ladder, fix things around the house yourself, and win every argument. None of this has anything to do with authentic manhood. God doesn't equate our manhood with how big or strong we are, but with how humble we are and how we humbly use our strength. God doesn't equate our manhood with how many women we slept with, but how healthily we express our sexual desires to the person that we married. God doesn't equate our manhood with how far up the corporate ladder we rise by whether or not we did our job with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And God doesn't equate our manhood with if we can fix a leaky pipe or not, but how we use our talents and gifts that He's given to us. And finally, God doesn't equate our manhood with how skillful an arguer we are, but how we listen to others. When God made us in His image, He equipped us everything that we need to be a man. And when God rebirthed us spiritually, He supernaturally empowered us with each of the things that we need to be a godly man who can grow and mature over time. God equipped every one of us with mind and will and emotions and interests and passions and abilities and talents and personality and everything else that we need to become a healthy, fully functioning man. 2 Kings 18 through 5 through 7, there wasn't a lot of great kings in the people of Israel. I only remember 5 great kings, and one of them was Hezekiah. And listen to what they say about Hezekiah. It says, Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands of the Lord that Moses had given him, and the Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he took. That's the goal of men. That's what we should focus on, following the Lord, trusting in the Lord, following after Him, following His commands. That's what it takes to be a true man. Secondly, the second lie is it's not okay to feel sad, scared, or hurt. My wife is really mean to me, and she hurts my feelings all the time. A very sensitive person. And she likes to make fun of me, especially when I watch movies, very sensitive movies. And one of the ones that she makes fun of me about, she doesn't, she's good to me, but she does make fun of me about this. I love The King's Speech. She thinks it's a boring movie. I don't know if I've told you this before or not, but I always get teared up about The King's Speech. She sat through this. That was terribly boring. It is a slow-moving movie, but it's a great movie. It's based on a true story of Prince Albert, who took over for King George VI of England, and he had to take over right during World War II. And his older brother was in line to take the kingship from him, but his brother married an American, and I think she was divorced, and so that canceled out his kingship, and he didn't want anything to do with it. He didn't want it. So he was next in line. The problem with Prince Albert was that he stuttered, and he was picked on as a little boy. He would go back into his childhood and how the nursemaids would pick on him and call him stupid because he stuttered as a little boy. And so you just feel for this person, and he's a very kind man. His wife was Elizabeth. And he has got these 2 little kids, and so you just start feeling for him. Well, he was in line to be king, and so he had no self-image, no self-esteem to do this, and he had to give lots of speeches. And so the whole thing, and they're moving into the war, and so he was going to have to give this big political speech to pull everybody together, but he would stutter. And so his wife hired a person to help him deal with his stuttering. He was an amateur person. and he came in and did some kind of interesting things. Like he would sing, they would play a record, and he would sing on the record, and he wouldn't stutter, just like Mel Tillis. You guys don't, some of you older folks will know Mel Tillis, who stuttered all the time, but when he sang country songs, he did great. So anyway, it's just this story of their friendship that developed, and there was some pushback because he wasn't a professional person. But it just caught my heart because this friendship of this king with this nobody, and he helps him get through this problem that he's having. And then in the end, the last session is when, this is where, see, she always laughs at me. She's laughing at me right now. He gives this speech and he doesn't stutter, and it's just awesome. And he rallies the people together. And you just feel for him. He's an underdog. That's what I like about it. It was an underdog that overcame something in his life. And it's just an awesome movie. So quit making fun of me. I have feelings. I get hurt. I'm a real man. It just goes to show sometimes we're not, it's almost like we're not supposed to be that. Like, what's that show that came out? This Is Us? Is that right? Yeah. I thought every time I hear that music, I have to walk out of the room because it's just too emotional. I'm like, my gosh, there's always something happening. I go, how can you watch this? I start crying when I hear the music playing when I walk into the room to get something to eat. Way too emotional. But we have emotions. Guys have emotions, even outside of ball games. That's when my emotions come out, is in ball games, when things don't go right. Men are often raised to never let you see them blink. And when it comes to expressing our painful emotions and feelings, we're kind of told to keep that in. To most men, this means that if something painful happens to you, like you fail at something or you suffer a loss of a loved one or someone is hurtful to you, that you need to make sure that no one sees you, that you got emotionally about it. Keep a stiff upper lip, or big boys don't cry, or be cool under fire, or sweep your emotions under the rug. All these things that we tell ourselves. Because having feelings just might reveal that you're sensitive, vulnerable, and an emotional human being. But not only is it okay to feel sad and scared and hurt emotionally, it's essential. Life is about losses and setbacks, and we're wired by God to feel sad when they occur. There's nothing wrong with that. Life is full of threatening things, so God has wired us to feel anxious when those things come our way. Life is filled with wounding things, so God wired us to feel hurt when someone is disrespectful and unappreciative and disloyal. Painful emotions, though unpleasant, are appropriate, and we need to let ourselves feel and express them more often as men. When you think of the strongest person in the Bible, I think of Jesus. But Jesus was very emotional. He was God in the flesh. And when we see him, we see that God is emotional as well. And when we see Jesus in the garden of the night when he's going to be sacrificed, in John 11, verse 33 through 36, just listen to the emotion. When Jesus saw her weeping, actually, this is when they find Lazarus. Sorry. When he finds Lazarus, I'm going to use that quote on another section here from when he's in the garden. He comes across his friend Lazarus had died. And when he comes onto the scene, all these people are weeping. And the sisters, Mary and Martha, come out and they said, oh, I wish you would have been here. You would have saved his life. And Jesus was going to use that to show who he truly was. But I just love this. It's one of my favorite sections in all the Bible because it tells me the heart of God. And it says, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, it says he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Now, deeply moved, it's hard to express that. He was very frustrated and angry at what was happening. There's emotion. Because death has entered into humanity. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And to me, one of the most powerful verses in all the Bible, it says Jesus wept. That God cares about humanity. That he weeps for his people. And he weeps in these very hard times. And then the Jew says, see how he loved him. Jesus was an emotional. Jesus is God. And he created us an emotional person. And so therefore it's important that, guys, we express that in a controlled way, but in a way, because that's who we are. We're emotional. And it's important that we be able to do that. So it's a lie to hold that stuff in. Number 3, my good intentions ought to satisfy everyone. We got great kingdoms that we've built with good intentions, haven't we? Great kingdoms. But good intentions ought to satisfy everyone. Now here's a great old song. I should have had Gary sing this one. Cats in the Cradle, back in, just so you can listen. But Cats in the Cradle is about a relationship between a man and his son. And the dad doesn't have any time for his son. And later on in life, he finds out that his son doesn't have any time for him. But let me read you the lyrics, because it fits right into what we're talking about. I'd sing it for you, but you don't want me to do that. A child arrived just the other day, came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. He was talking before I knew it, and as he grew, he said, I'm going to be just like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be just like you. And then it goes into the cats in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when. We'll get together then. You know that we'll have a good time then. My son turned 10 just the other day. Said, thanks for the ball. Now come and let's play. Will you teach me to throw? I said, not today. I got a lot to do, he said. Well, that's okay. And he walked away and he smiled and he said, you know, I'm going to be just like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be just like you. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon and the little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you're going to home, son, I don't know when. We'll get together then. You'll know that we'll have a good time then. And he came from college just the other day, so much like a man, I just had to say, I'm proud of you. Won't you sit for a while? And he shook his head and said with a smile, what I'm feeling like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. So see you later. Can I have them, please? And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon and the little boy blue and the man of the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when. We'll get together then. You know that we'll have a good time then. Now, I've long since retired and my son's moved away. I called him up just the other day and I'd like to see you if you don't mind. He said, I'd love to, Dad, if I could find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu, but it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been excuse me. It's been real nice talking to you. As I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. Isn't that great? And it goes into the last chorus again. That's putting off. That's great intentions. Now that's within the context of family, but there's a lot of other things that can happen as well. Things, projects getting done, whatever it is. We promise, and we never ever change. T.S. Eliot, the great poet and essayist, wrote, most of the evil in this world is done by people with good intentions. Margaret Thatcher, used to be Prime Minister of Great Britain, she said, no one would remember the Good Samaritan if he had only had good intentions. And Aldous Huxley, the English writer and philosopher, says it a little more strongly. Hell isn't merely paved with good intentions, it's walled and roofed with them. Yes, and it's furnished as well. Good intentions. We have to be careful about that. That doesn't count for anything. Good intentions, being present, being engaged, being listeners, those are most important when it comes to our relationships around us. James talks about this in a couple different ways. One of them is about our own faith. And we can say that we have faith, but if you don't have any actions with that, it's not really faith. In James 2, verse 14 through 17, he says, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith and has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose to a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, good intentions, but does nothing about their physical needs. What good is it? And in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by actions, is dead. He goes on to write in James 4, verse 17, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do, and he doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. Good intentions doesn't count. So we got to not buy into that lie. Number 4, this is the uncomfortable one. Sex is about my pleasure and enjoyment. One of the things I like to do in pre-marriage counseling, I didn't do it this time. I just meeting with Catherine and Zach for their wedding coming up in August, which is going to be exciting. But I typically, when I first meet a couple, I go through what we do in pre-marriage counseling. So I talk about a biblical marriage. We kind of go over everything. I said we're going to talk about biblical marriage and communication and conflict. How to fight fair, personality differences because men and women are different personality-wise. What roles we have, and then finances, and then they say, and we'll talk about sexual intimacy, and I'll use puppets for that, and then we'll do, and they go, what? I said, I'm just kidding. I like to make them feel uncomfortable. But it's a very important topic to talk about. because especially in the context of marriage. And we have different views on what this is all about. Now, let me start out. We got young men and we got older gentlemen here. So I can just start out with this. Sex outside of marriage is sin, period. No discussion. That's what the Bible says. And so we're talking about marriage relationships here. In Hebrews 13, verse 4, the author says, marriage should be honored by all and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexual immoral. That's a command. That's the command. Marriage should be honored by all and the marriage bed kept pure. That means don't do it until you're married. Now, when in a relationship, and I talk with young people a lot about this, and when they're living together, and so sometimes when you're intimate with each other, it could mask your feelings. I remember doing a wedding one time of a couple that lived together for 7 years, and they tested off the charts with everything. I do a pre-marriage inventory with them, and it looked like they were compatible. And they got married and they divorced within a year. I'm like, what in the world? Because when you're intimate with someone, it can mask, because intimacy was meant to seal your relationship. That's why God created it. It's meant to glue. It says when you become one, it's a glue. You become one. You're glued together. It's that oneness, that ultimate intimacy between a man and a woman. And that's how God created it. It's meant to elevate your relationship with each other. And so when you do that with multiple partners, a part of you goes with them. And it masks the true love. And I always tell gentlemen, I said, learn to date your mate through a relationship, not just through the physical aspect of it. Because when you do that, I mean, there's statistics that say the more sex that you have before you're married, the higher your divorce rate and all those kinds of things. But people don't pay attention to I'm in love. I'm in love. And I have to express that love. But I tell young people, protect your date. Now, it changes when you have a daughter. And I want my daughter protected. And I don't want people taking advantage of her. It changes your view of everything when you have daughters. It changes your view of pornography. It changes your view on relationships and men. And you want them to protect. Oh, I always challenge young men, protect the person you're dating. Protect them. If not for you, for the next person or the person that you would marry. That's honorable. They're not meant to be used for your own purposes. Now, when a person... God created us with different needs, and this includes sexual needs as well. And that's why it's important to learn about his needs and her needs. That's a good book, by the way, by Kevin Harley, His Needs, Her Needs, to develop a healthy relationship. Women need to feel loved and appreciated. Guys, the wind can blow and we're ready to go. But gals need this relationship. They need to feel like they're loved. There's a book that came out quite a few years ago called Sex Begins in the Kitchen. And it's just talking about the daily routines of life. It's the relationship act that's very, very important for the women. They want to feel that love before they express that love with each other. And so we need to know how to do that. I told this, I was with a bunch of softball guys, and this is 25 years ago. And so they were drinking some adult beverages, and that means when they had a few of them, they would ask me very personal questions. And one of them says, my wife doesn't want to have sex with me, or what am I supposed to do? I said, number one, I kind of looked at him, and in my mind I said, number one, take a bath. Number two, shave your scrub. And number three, get the chew out of your mouth. Why would anybody want to chew that? I didn't say that. That's what I thought. But I told them I said, well, how about, instead of just sitting around, how about you help her during the day? Clean the dishes and vacuum and do these kinds of things. And that's appreciative to women. Maybe not every woman, but they like that. You're involved in their life. You're playing with the kids. You're doing all these things. He goes, all right. And so about 2 or 3 weeks later, he goes, Aaron, it didn't work. I did this and I did this. And I'm going, okay, we got issues here. I needed to spend more time in counseling with him. Here's the deal. Sex is not about you. It's about your spouse as well. And instead of thinking about it in a selfish way, think about it in a mutual way. What will be best for the both of us? And it's so easy. And our motors are different. They really, really are. And you have to understand that and realize that. And so it's very, very important that we look to each other's needs. The Bible talks about that. In 1 Corinthians 7, verses 3 and 4. It's interesting. I did a sermon series on that a few years ago. And it's interesting won't give you the context of it. Was when they became Christians, they thought they had to break away from anything physical. There was a philosophy going around at that time, just starting to go around, called Gnosticism. And Gnosticism believed that we're spirits trapped in a physical body, and anything physical is wrong. Everything physical is evil. And so when some of that was sneaking into the church, and so they felt like when a couple was intimate with each other, they were sharing each other physically, and that was wrong. And so some Christians were pulling away and getting divorces, and they just had a misunderstanding. So the Corinthian church is really messed up if you haven't read through that book. My sermon series is called Messy Church. So he's writing to them about some of these things that they had misbeliefs about. And one of them was couples that would withhold from themselves because they thought it was wrong to do so, wrong to have sex with each other, married couples. In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3 through 4, he says, the husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. In the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you can devote yourself to prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Now, very interesting there. It talks about how important that is to maintain a healthy life, sex life, but also that it's mutual. It's mutual. It's not just for me. It's for the both of you. And so look for ways that you can do that in a much better way. And there's great resources. I should have brought some of them, great Christian resources that can help you develop that intimacy with yourself. All right, moving on. We're done with that. Number 5, I can do life by myself. I used to spend a lot of time with a couple of pastor friends. I don't have best friends. I have lots of friends. And one of the things that I felt bad with our kids growing up, we never had like a couple families that we would just hang out with all the time so that our kids would grow up and have best friends growing up together as a family. Now, we did that when I was growing up on the farm. We'd have some neighbor families that we'd spend a lot of time with, we'd go camping with, and then we grew up together, and the kids grew up together, and we were good friends. And they're the ones that show up at funerals. At my mom's funeral, they would show up for that. We would show up at their funerals. But we didn't do a lot of that. Growing up, we were busy on the weekends because I preach on the weekends and carried to daycare, so we just didn't have a lot of time to develop those kinds of relationships. And I feel bad about that. And I have a lot of friends. I don't have best friends that I would hang out with or travel with or do things. Other than I had a couple pastor friends that we really grew close. And one of them went to be with the Lord way too early. He got up one day and he got ready and bent over to tie his shoes, and he died. And he just preached a sermon the day before entitled, You Never Know. You never know. Because that person died suddenly. And David got up, did his devotions, got up and got ready. And he sat on his bed and bent over to tie his shoe, and he died. And that's where they found him late. And I miss him because he was a confidant for me. His name is David Kester. Some of you know David. And my other good friend is Kevin White, another pastor. Both of them went to the Bible college, and this was here. And they were my peers that I looked to because both of my mentors passed away. I've had a lot of people pass away in my mentoring life. But we'd go to conferences together, and we'd have great times. We were able to share our stories together and come back, and it was just great. We'd go to North American Christian Convention, and I could call them on anything and tell them anything. So it's really good. And it's really cool because you need those people in your life, and especially when you're going through rough things in life. And so when my son Jackson had his tumor in his spine, it was my friend Kevin that came and spent time with me and just hung out with me. And he just came up and sat with me up at the hospital. He lost his own son to cancer, a 9-year-old boy, and lost him within a week of knowing that he was sick. And so he understood those terrible feelings that you have not knowing what's happening. But I don't know what we would have done or what I would have done without him being there. He didn't say anything. He just hung out. He was just there. And I think sometimes, guys, we think that we can do things on our own. But there's times when we really need somebody else around us. And we need to have confidence that we could share things with people. It's not that they look down that we're weak when we're struggling with things, but that you look to them so that you can get encouragement and support from them. You know, God created us for community. It says in Genesis, it is not good for man to be alone. Now he's talking about relationship. He created us for relationship, not only for marriage relationship, but you don't have to be married to be fulfilled in life. It just means that we need people in life. We need community. God is community, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And he created us for community. He committed the church for community. We can't do Christianity by ourselves. And so we need that in our life. And guys have a tendency to do things on our own, that we don't need anybody else. I'm included with that. We were meant for relationship, and we were meant to help each other make it through life. The great Solomon wrote about this in Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9 through 12, and he says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. You can get a lot more done. If either of them falls down, one can get up, help the other on up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. I think that's excellent advice for all of us, that we need people in our life to help us and to help us make it through whatever that we go through. And it's a lie to say that we can do it on our own. All right, let's close her off here. I came across this poem. I think Chris Sermon has it in his book, and I just thought it was great. This is The Measure of a Man. Not how did he die, but how did he live? Not what did he gain, but what did he give? These are the units to measure of a man as a man, regardless of birth. Not what was his station, but had he a heart? And how did he play his God-given part? Was he ever ready with a word of good cheer, to bring back a smile, to banish a tear? Not what was his church, nor what was his creed, but had he befriended those really in need? Not what did the sketch in the newspaper say, but how many were sorry that he passed away. That's what it means to be a man. And ladies, we're going to do the best that we can to be the best men for you and for our friends and for our church family. And I pray that we can learn not to tell ourselves lies and that we can live the truth out, how God sees us and wants us to be. In Genesis 6, verse 9, I think these next 2 verses are all that we as guys should focus upon and try to shoot for. They're kind of the verses that we want people to talk about us about. In Genesis 6, verse 9, it says, this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. That's what I want to be known for. Be a righteous man, that I was blameless among the people that I walked with, and that he was faithful to God. And Job, another great character of the Bible. In the land of Uz, it says in Job 1:1, there is a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. That's our focus, gentlemen. That's our purpose in life. That's what we want to be known for. That's what a real man is. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the truth of your word that guides us as we tell ourselves these lies. And a lot of it comes from what culture expects from us. And so I pray that we can ignore that and always look to your truth. Sometimes that truth is really hard because it confronts us. It goes against the grain. But it's the truth. And you know how we are to function. You created us, Lord. And we get into trouble when we get out of that lane, when we try to do life on our own. And so I pray as men that we can be the best godly men that we can possibly be. And help us build women up and encourage women and lift them up and be a companion like we should for our friends, for our wives, for our nieces, for our grandparents, or whoever it might be, ladies in our churches, that we can be champions of them. They need us, Lord. Our society needs strong, healthy, godly men. And I pray that we can lead the way. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.